there are 100 teachers teaching in a college or a school, they all will have 100 different ways of teaching. And the more you experience, the more your teaching method or pedagogy refines or changes, and you can always contribute to how we can bring innovation into teaching, right? So it's formed by an educator's teaching beliefs. What do I believe in? Do I believe in that it's essential for a child to first know the theory and then move on to the practical? Or do I feel that while doing the practical, this child can know the theory also? And it concerns the interplay between culture and different ways to learn also. Let's say, I'll give a very apt example. I'll keep switching on and off my video so that I'm there. I'll give a very good example of this when we say concerns the interplay between culture and different ways to learn. Let's consider there's somebody teaching a class on growing wheat. So there's a teacher who's sitting there in a city or somewhere where you cannot you don't have an access to the fields and all. And then let's say there's a teacher who's sitting in a village teaching the students about how wheat is grown. Can you tell me what will be the difference in why do I talk about culture? Because over here, the teacher in the village can straight away take the students to, let's say, a field and show them how wheat is grown. However, the same may not be possible if it is an educator who's there in the city, because he doesn't have access to that kind of on-the-job training or on-the-field resources. So pedagogy is formed by an educator's teaching beliefs as well as the interplay between culture and different ways to learn. So what are the different ways to learn? How do I feel the students will learn? And what is the culture of a given place that I belong to? And in order to help students to build on prior learning, meaningful classroom relationships must exist. That's very, very important. At many a times I see a disconnect between the teacher and the student, because the teacher feels that my job is to go and teach, and the student feels that my job is just to go and learn from there. As you would have seen in Amir Khan's clipping, the senior professor who was there, he thought that my only job is to help the students agree what has already been established, not to help the students learn, right? So this is very, very important as far as the prior learning or meaningful classroom relationships is concerned. So a carefully considered pedagogy is essential in enabling students to effectively learn and help them develop higher order thinking skills. So when we talk about higher order thinking skills, we mean that the student should be able to question the existing beliefs. If Newton had always believed that anything which goes up will never come down, we wouldn't have had the concept of gravity. If Einstein would not have thought that what is the relationship between energy and speed of light, we wouldn't have got the equation of E is equal to mc square. So it's very essential for us to develop our students into higher order thinking skills. And when we talk about higher order thinking skills, the forms of pedagogy are basically 4. That is social, culturally responsive, critical, and Socratic. Means we can have these 4 different styles of teaching. I'm not saying that these 4 are the ones which are all inclusive or which somebody has written, but generally we say that these 4 are the forms of pedagogy, forms of teaching that we do. So I may be a teacher who follows a social methodology. We'll go into details of what all these mean, but as of now you just remember that there are 4 different forms which any teacher would. So can I just ask a small question here? Out of the 3 clips that we saw, can you tell me which one appeared to you as social? You can just give me answers on the basis of 3 clips. Let's call clip 1 as clip 1, clip 2 as clip 2, and the one with Shabana asked me as clip 3. Can you tell me which particular form of pedagogy do you think clip 1 belonged to, or clip 2 or clip 3 belonged to? Okay, we come to first pedagogy, which is social pedagogy. So it defines the tasks and processes of all social activities. And the biggest thing is that it safeguards the autonomy of the profession. And it appeals the reflective and communicative abilities of the worker as the key to competence. So what we basically see is that we identify which are the social activities which we can take on. So you'll see some teachers who involve their students in a lot of activities, a lot of social activities. You might have some social studies teacher taking students to let's say a museum, or taking students to a zoo or somewhere where they show and define the task or process of all social activity. The way I gave you an example, that let's say I have to teach the kids how to grow wheat. So what I exactly do is I define the task and processes, and then I might take the children onto the field. So this kind of a pedagogy where the teacher focuses more on various social activities to drive the point is called as social pedagogy. Then we come on to the critical pedagogy. So it's a philosophy of education and social movement, and it is developed and applied concept from critical theory to related traditions to the field of education and study of culture. So what you basically do is the concepts that are already known, you try to teach those concepts, and you inculcate or you encourage students to challenge those concepts. It's something like going to a class and telling the class that there's some kind of a issue going on. Let's say I want to teach how chemical bonds happen. So the biggest example would be you ask students how do they form friends. That's critical pedagogy. So it insists that issues of social justice and democracy are not distinct from the acts of teaching and learning. Very, very important concept that they say here, that learning should be democratic. Everybody should have the right to give their viewpoint. Like over here in the first clip, if you will see, the teacher was not ready to accept the viewpoint that Amir Khan had, that teaching can be simple also. So critical pedagogy is where you do not stop your students from being critical. Let's say it's a maths faculty teaching integration and telling that this is the formula for integrating. Maybe some student comes up and says, sir, I cannot find the area under curve using this formula. I don't agree with what you are teaching. So that's what the last point says, that it insists that issues of social justice and democracy are not distinct from acts of teaching and learning. So there's social justice, that okay, you may have a different viewpoint. There's democracy, freedom to think, freedom to express. Democracy is by the people, for the people, and of the people, where people have freedom to speech, freedom to expression, freedom to talk, freedom to voice their opinions. Similarly, in critical pedagogy, if you are a teacher who appreciates a counter viewpoint from the student, that's called as critical pedagogy. Then we come to culturally responsive pedagogy. It is what somebody had mentioned when I asked the question. It is a student-centric approach to teaching, and you identify the cultural strength of the students and you nurture them to promote achievement, and the well-being of the students' cultural place in the world is done. So what you basically do is you put student in the center, that what is the background or what is the strata that the students are coming from. Let's say there's a student who has throughout his life learned in Hindi medium. Suddenly you expose him to a class where you expect the faculty only to talk in English or to talk in some other language which is kind of alien to him. It's very, very difficult for the student to understand. So culturally responsive pedagogy is where you identify that what is the cultural strength of the students. You may have students who are extremely talented in mathematics, who are extremely talented in some kind of a domain, and what is done is that the nurturing or the promotion of students in that domain is done. So that is culturally responsive pedagogy. It's a very, very challenging pedagogy because a teacher who follows this pedagogy needs to understand, let's say in a class of 60 students, which student has got which kind of a culture or which background does he come from, and how can he perform the best. It's very, very important. There's an old English saying which says that you cannot fit a square peg into a round hole, and that is what is the basis of culturally responsive pedagogy, that please try to fit a square peg in a square hole or a round peg in a round hole instead of doing vice versa. And then we have Socratic pedagogy. It's not about asking questions with specific answers in mind. So I have an answer in mind and now I ask your question. So I know that, okay, answer to this question is this, now I'll frame my question. No, it's an active engagement of dialogue. As I told you, please ask me questions, because otherwise I'll ask you a question for which, doesn't it always happen? I'm sure I have very, very reputed people in this audience. I'm sure you all would have been a resource person someday. So what do you generally do? You'll ask a question where you know what the answer is. However, when we engage in an active dialogue, what will happen? Instead of always asking a question, the answer for which we know, we may come across a question, the answer for which we do not know. That's why Socratic pedagogy, because Socrates was a great philosopher and thinker. I'm sure you all know about that. So unless and until you are not posed with questions which are unknown, which are unheard, and to which you do not know answer, learning cannot happen. Basically, when we talk about pedagogy, what is it? It's teaching style. What is the ultimate aim of teaching style? The ultimate aim of teaching is learning. A teacher is delivering a content, or a teacher is doing something so that the audience on the other side have some kind of an increment to the knowledge that they already have, right? So Socratic pedagogy, the teacher, and okay, after this slide I'll come to something which is very, very important. So a Socratic pedagogy will always try to engage or involve the students in a dialogue. You will see there are some teachers who actually start a class and they let the class only finish it, because they encourage discussions in the class, they encourage people having a counter view of each other, and it involves asking students to think and be creative in their answers. Okay, I'll give you a simple example. Some days back, what happened, so I'll just turn on my video. Some days what happened, my son who's in 12th standard, he came to me and he asked me a question. He said, Mama, how do you write an essay on, let's say, what are the challenges of science? So I told him, you pick up Ren and Martin, all essays are written there, you can always see what is written there. He said, no, if I pick it up from there, what is my contribution to the essay? And then I asked him, I said, he said, lots of my friends have written and it's the same essay which everybody has written. But I want to write something different. I want to write what I feel. So it's very, very important for you to foster that inquisitiveness, that curiosity in the students, that you force them to think. I'm saying there are some students who are always going to be ready and willing to think. But to some students, you might have to force them to think. And you might also have to foster creativity in them if they are not. What happens many times, you give an assignment and you see out of 50 students in a class, 48 have written the same answer. So that is not Socratic pedagogy. What is Socratic pedagogy? If you are a teacher who once give an assignment, gets 50 answers different, and you do not ridicule or you do not counter the students for why they have given 50 different answers or their own viewpoints, and appreciate each and every answer, and ask the student to justify why does he feel like that. I know we have to complete our syllabus also. And if we follow this kind of a pedagogy, probably we might not be able to complete the required portions or whatever. But there are certain topics which you can leave to the students and ask them to think creatively and be creative in their answers, right? A very, very important thing which we as instructors must always remember, that we must remain open to what the students might respond or ask. So whatever I have prepared in this 1 hour presentation, I should not be ready to only answer the questions which I know. I should also be ready to get some questions to which I do not know the answer, and maybe throw it open to the audience and ask them if you know this, because that will add on to my knowledge about the subject as well. So it's very, very important what I showed you just now. Also, having discussed these 4 pedagogies, doesn't mean that a teacher will follow a specific pedagogy. Generally, you'll have instructors always following some hybrid pedagogy. I may be following culturally responsible as well as Socratic pedagogy. Somebody else may be following, let's say, a social as well as a Socratic pedagogy. Somebody might be mixing all 4 of them together. That's what I told you. Everybody has their own pedagogy, which may be a hybrid, a combination and enhancement of what are the 4 basic pedagogies that we study.